Hello and welcome to our Reboot review. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we're discussing Reboot My Two Bobs, which originally aired November 25th, 2001, at least here in Canada, I think in the US. Yeah. Oh, it aired earlier in the US. It aired on November 9th. That's interesting. Anyway, moving along. So, Dave, any idea what the number one film at the box office was this week?
Oh, in and around that time.
2001, it's nice and chilly outside. Good time to go see a movie. I'm going to give you a hint. It's a movie I've never seen that's part of a huge franchise that everybody apparently knows about.
There's a couple of those. It doesn't exactly narrow it down.
There is, but
Uh,
this is like a major franchise that had like a bunch of movies. Like
yes, with
7 or 8,
that.
I think. Like it's a big franchise.
Okay, with that. That slims it down, but still kind of the case of, shoot, which one is it? And how horrible are the particular people going to be at me for not remembering which one it is?
I think I'll catch more heat on this because I haven't seen any of these movies.
Hmm.
Although I think I read the first 2 or 3 books. That's another hint.
If it was around that time. I think I know it's the series, but now I suppose the movie. But I suppose I'll just take the stab in the dark and say it was still the first Harry Potter movie in the Sorcerer's Stone.
Sorcerer's Stone is the first one, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Because it was always the case of it's kinda near around the time for the second one-ish, believe.
The first one just came out, and don't they put out like one a year at that point?
Something like that. They usually are fairly good until after the third-ish or so one, where it took a couple of years.
Okay. The entire series is literally sitting next to me on my bookshelf, but I've just never watched it.
Hmm.
Alrighty. Quickly, just for other major films that came out this year, because we otherwise won't get a chance to talk about them. In December, you would get Ocean's 11, which
Hmm.
is a pretty good little film. You'd get a movie called Vanilla Sky, which nobody remembers.
Yeah.
And then to round out the end of the year, Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring, which I
Which is
have seen
completely
Fellowship, I
understandable.
just haven't seen any of the others.
Eh, there are bits. There's little things of other particular stuff. If you're into the series, it's definitely nice, but also a marvelous case of there's so much in the books. So much in the books
I
that they
also
don't
have
bother putting in the films.
I also have the Lord of the Rings movies on my bookshelf, and I haven't watched them yet.
I wish you the best of luck and pray that you don't get stuck with having to watch the additional hour or so runtime of particular films.
Oh no, I just have the theatrical cut, not the extended edition or whatever it was called.
Mhm.
Alrighty, moving on to the number one song in America this week, Dave. Any guesses? What were people into on this particular week in 2001?
Yeah, and around that time. I can't specifically remember from last week which the song was. Um, Still not immediately jumping out in my memory.
I would be a little surprised if you know this. It's not a genre that I would say Dave would know.
I've got nothing.
Okay, it's a song called "Family Affair" by Mary J. Blige, Blige. She's apparently an
Hmm.
R&B singer.
Um,
That's why I was kind of
no,
like, I don't know if Dave's gonna know who that is.
like it's understandable for the time with the music genre and whatnot, but yeah, no, I would have no idea who the artist specifically is.
Alrighty, now for video games. We're gonna quickly go through the rest of 2001 because my god, was this year basically informed my childhood.
Hmm.
Okay, so November 18th was must have been like the day, like really early in the GameCube's life because my god, did they release a bunch of bangers.
Hmm.
So we get a port of Crazy Taxi on the GameCube, which is fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
We would also get Super Monkey Ball on the GameCube.
Yes, which was very much a thing.
I prefer the second one, but the first one is still very good.
Yes.
We would also get Luigi's Mansion, which is a game I've never played.
It is very much fun for the specifics of what it is, and also the marvelous case of, hey, new Nintendo console, here's Mario's brother.
Yeah. They never. Oh, they did. They did. What's the Mario game that came out on that? Sunshine.
Yes, but that wasn't until a year or two later-ish.
Yeah, that was a while later. If you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up WWF Road to WrestleMania, which I would advise not doing.
Because of the obvious thing, or because of the most obvious other thing that is like, ugh.
I look, handheld wrestling games, especially at the time, were never good. I mean, they could be now because, like, yeah, it didn't work well on a Game Boy Advance.
Mm.
Rather, you would have been better off saving your money to go to the next day to the store and pick up a little game called Wario Land 4.
Yes.
Or, if you really felt the need to buy a wrestling game also on November 19th, the same day as Wario Land 4, and you had a PS2, you could pick up WWF SmackDown, Just Bring It. Which, while
Yeah.
not my favorite of the SmackDown games, is still pretty damn good.
Yes, and being around that time, seeing the specific advertisements and whatnot for it, I recognized it, but also a marvelous case of did not touch it.
Yeah, my personal favorite is Here Comes the Pain, which came out in like 2003-ish. But anyway, moving along. On November 20th, if you're a PC gamer, you could pick up a little game called Return to Castle Wolfenstein.
Ooh.
Yes. November 21st, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles, which I can't imagine is good.
No, it's one of the cases of I remember vaguely seeing a clip within specific Star Wars games of the ones that existed around the time, and it's like it's understandable, but it's also kind of the case of they could have done things better.
Yeah, probably. November 21st, also, if you had a GameCube and you lived in Japan, this little game called Super Smash Bros. Melee came out.
Oh man, it is a thing. That was like a blip on the radar, and then nobody thought about it ever again.
Yeah, nobody remembers that game. It's not, like, still hugely influential. There's not really anything too interesting for the rest of November, so we'll move on to December. December 3rd, if you were a PS2 gamer, you could pick up a little thing called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance.
Yes.
Baldur's
Which I
Gate.
believe supposedly got ported to a couple of different supposed things.
I
but
think it also
one
came
of
to, like,
those-
Xbox and stuff later on, yeah.
Yeah, later on with that. It was also kind of the case of always sat on the shelf and caught my interest, but never enough to actually get it. And then, of course, Baldur's Gate 3 kind of exploded, and then it was like, this series.
Oh, yeah, it came to Xbox and GameCube, like, a year later. And then also came to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, yada, 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 in 2021.
You know, how things kind of worked around in the day.
On December 3rd, I was in line to pick up a slightly different game. Well, I might not have bought it on release day, but I bought it around then. A little game called Pikmin.
Yes, very much a thing.
Absolutely. Pikmin was great. On December 3rd, I feel like a lot more people were in line to purchase a little game called Super Smash Bros. Melee when it made its way to North America.
Yeah, yeah. The crazy little flash in the pan.
Yeah, like I said, not influential anymore. Also on December 3rd, if you had a PS2, you don't feel too left out because you could pick up Jak and Daxter The Precursor Legacy.
Yes,
Which is
very
the
much
first
fun.
one, right?
And another addition to the PS or PlayStation mascots that was added to the list.
Yeah, that's the first one, right?
One of the particular ones, yes, that was him. Then later on, Ratchet and Clank, Sly Cooper.
No,
lots
no,
of
no,
other-
no. I meant that's the first Jak and Daxter game, right?
Yes, one of the very first ones brought out by the studio Naughty Dog that went on to do a whole lot of interesting things.
They did. I wish they would go back to some of those platforming games, though.
It would be neat, but it kind of seems like a case of the particular people that came up with the idea and went along with the particular sort of stuff have far since retired from the series. So,
Yeah, and they've
mm,
moved on to doing totally different stuff now.
yeah, yeah.
December 4th, if you had a PS1, you weren't too left out because you could pick up a little game called Mega Man X6, which I'm sure was probably good because Mega Man games usually are.
Usually, aside from those notorious ones that have those particular things that people absolutely despise.
I was never a big fan of the like regular Mega Man games, but I totally fucked with the Battle Network series.
Hmm. No, it was still kind of a case of I think my first introduction was more within the X series and then dabbled within most of the other series. Interesting enough for its stylings, but still just the case of it's a series.
Yes. December 7th, if you had a GameCube, you could pick up a little game called Cell Damage, which is a game I feel like nobody remembers now, but I remember enjoying it at the time.
Yes. Because it's one of the particular ones that you look at it and you're almost kind of like, this kind of seems like video game trash. But then you actually get into it and it's like, oh wow, this is actually very cute and ridiculous for what it is.
Yes. December 12th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Mortal Kombat Advance, which um, maybe don't.
Yeah, yeah. Because you can understand Mortal Kombat, but also kind of the case of specific fighting game on the Game Boy Advance.
If I remember correctly, and I'm not 100% sure, I remember this was one where it was the GP, like how they coded it really terribly, or the GBA wasn't powerful enough, and like the frame rate was terrible, and it was basically unplayable.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
that usually causes issues.
yes, yeah, it usually does, especially with a fighting game. On December 18th, if you had a GameCube, you could pick up Universal Studios Theme Parks Adventure, which is a game I didn't even know existed, but kind of sounds awesome.
I believe so. It's kind of one of those cases of they decided to work with that style of game, Roller Coaster Tycoon, and other particular ones, bringing it on to consoles and other sorts of things. Though, in my case, I wouldn't really get that much of a taste of it until the series later on, the Thrill Park or such, I believe its name is, the couple of years later.
Oh, okay. It's set in Universal Studios Japan, and there's mini games based on different attractions at the theme park. But apparently, it's terrible.
Yeah, it seems understandable.
Okay. Oh, here's a little game. On December 20th, if you were in the U.S. or Canada, you could finally pick up Final Fantasy X.
Because Final Fantasy X is a story.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the ones that people like.
Yeah, kind of got that interesting sort of style of moved on from the bit style of Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, but still brought the fancy looking characters and actually made them look more realistic with the actual graphics at the time.
Yes, it did. It actually still, if you look at it now, it still looks pretty good.
Yes, they don't dive that far into the uncanny valley.
No, because they kept it. They didn't try to make it look photorealistic, and it holds up a lot better.
Yeah.
December 21st, if you had an Xbox, you could pick up a little game called Silent Hill 2 Director's Cut.
Because Silent Hill 2 is a thing. It's a thing coming out fairly soon now, honestly.
Yes, did you hear they announced a release date for the remake?
Yes, though I can't
December
specifically
8th.
remember
Or,
when.
not October 8th, not December 8th.
Yay, right in time for the spooks.
Yes, I will. I might have to book a couple of days off work to play that. Anyway, finally, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could go on December 21st and pick up Mortal Kombat 3 on the Game Boy Advance.
Because Mortal Kombat games on a handheld system, not the craziest idea, but also kind of a case of why.
Oh, yeah, I feel like this was probably a shit show as well.
Again, video game development at the time, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, let us move on to my two Bobs. Okay. So, according to Wikipedia, this aired 1 week after the previous movie,
Mhm.
and it picks up directly after the previous film, which was Damon Rising. So,
Yes.
at the end of Damon Rising, Bob and Dot got engaged. To the confusion of everyone, however, a portal then opened from the web, and Ray Tracer and another Bob stepped through it. Unfortunately, Ray Tracer gets basically nothing to do in this movie, and I basically forgot he was even there.
Yeah. There was a couple brief scenes that was like, oh hey, there he is.
Yeah, he's
Oh hey,
basically a
there he is.
background character,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate.
Mhm.
In as much as the second Bob looks like the original from seasons 1 and 2, Dot calls him Bob and calls the Bob who merged with his key tool Glitch Bob. Uh, Most of my two Bobs is taken up by the efforts of Dot, the two Bobs themselves, and the other mainframers to ascertain which Bob is the original and which is the copy and come to terms with the situation in general.
Mm.
Because Bob can reboot and Glitch Bob can't, Bob spends much of the first half of the film bonding with Matrix and others by helping them win games. After some counseling from Fong and Mouse, Dot decides to marry the new Bob, whereupon Glitch Bob. Okay, this is going to get confusing. There's two Bobs, and I'm going to refer to Glitch Bob as the one who merged with Glitch, and Bob as the one who didn't. Although you'll see it, it's just kind of confusing.
Just a teeny bit.
Earnestly attempts to return himself to his original form in order to win Dot back. His efforts ultimately fail and leave him in a catatonic state, covered in a dark, starry crystal that proves to be impenetrable. Dot continues with her wedding plans as Glitch Bob is treated at the supercomputer. She laments that her father, Wellman, is too nullified to attend, but when the infection in Enzo's icon is transferred to Wellman, who's in that, like, goopy thing stage,
Yes, yes, yes.
he becomes intelligent enough to walk her down the aisle in a mechanical suit. Glitchbob's continue steadily worsens on Dot's wedding day. The impenetrable starry substance covering him gradually dims completely, and the Guardians believe they have lost him. This moment of crisis prompts all of the other key tools, which had disconnected from their Guardians when they are infected by Damon, to return to the supercomputer to separate Glitch from Bob and revive him, before returning to the Guardians. The Guardians discover that this Bob's web degraded code no longer matches what they have on file, suggesting that he is in fact the copy. Web Bob returns to mainframe to stop the wedding, but Dot rejects him in favor of the new Bob. Even Glitch seems to leave him for the new Bob, leading everyone to believe that Glitch Bob is the copy. Just as Glitch Bob starts to leave in despair, Glitch steals some code from who we assume is original Bob, and gives it to Glitch Bob and restores his body to the original form. The loss of that code causes the Bob Dot was marrying to shapeshift, revealing a terrible truth. Glitch Bob was the original, while the new Bob has been Megabyte in disguise. Which, okay, this is an interesting way at least to bring back Megabyte. I'm on board so far, but I'll get to the part I don't like later on.
Right, yes.
Bob engages Megabyte in a spectacular battle in the church, but Megabyte escapes by disguising himself as a Bino. An investigation reveals that Megabyte has become a Trojan horse, which gives him the power to shapeshift and effectively disguise himself as anyone. It is also revealed that Megabyte had inadvertently stolen parts of Bob's Guardian code when he crushed Glitch at the end of Season 2. And he used that code to impersonate him until Glitch returned to the original Bob during the wedding. Meanwhile, Megabyte starts disguising himself as other mainframers, including Mike the TV, and assembles his viral army. Megabyte eludes capture by using various aliases and a doppelganger, and ultimately infiltrates the war room by taking on the form of Frisket. This I don't like, and I'll explain why later.
Yes, right, yes.
After subverting various personnel, including Dot's father, and capturing Enzo, Megabyte gains complete control of the principal office. The film ends with him proclaiming that he will now follow his predatory virus nature. He is no longer out to take over mainframe again or even the supercomputer. He just wants revenge on the mainframers. His last words, which are the final of the series, are, "Prepare yourselves for the hunt." Okay. Now, Dave, I'm going to ask you to tell me what you thought of this movie before I give you my opinion.
So, quite honestly, just with all the particular things they decided to go with, the story style, how things kind of panned out, there was cringe. Oh dear God, there was particular bits of cringe. Just who who there was only like the one or two moments that I was like, I'm happy I remembered that, but I also remembered that. And it was kind of like, I'm not looking forward to that particular part. But it's still nostalgic to see the particular series at the time, especially the stuff that they reference, touched on, and fit within the story for most bits from there. And although there was still little bits of regression or trying to fit certain characters into certain boxes in certain kind of cases, it kind of had to be done for the story to kind of run along as it kind of was. But especially once the truth is revealed, Megabyte is back, and action kind of gets going, the spectacle is definitely fairly nice, though it's a little bit questionable in places, but also the case of it's marvelous, amazing. You hear that last line, and I just remember the typical joke from the Nostalgia Critic discussing like, "Oh my gosh, it ended so great. What the heck's gonna happen?" Cancelled. Curse you! And all the particular stuff from that. There was bits, but especially with this film and whatnot from there, there were just particular bits of cringe. It's like, ooh, ooh, it would have been so much better if they just made those short episodes.
Okay, so here's my thought. My biggest issue, and I think the movie's fine overall. Let me start by saying
Okay.
that I don't think it's bad. I just think there are some things that I would have changed to make it more interesting.
Mm,
So first of all, I do like they did a bit of a redesign on Megabyte,
okay.
and that actually looks pretty good. I have no problem with that. Um, but I wouldn't have brought Megabyte back. I would have at least upgraded him to Gigabyte because I feel like we've already defeated Megabyte. Why do we have to go through that again?
Mm,
Like, it just seems kind of lame.
okay.
Um, my biggest thing though is okay. So we establish that Megabyte has got an upgrade, which should just make him Gigabyte, but whatever. They want to call him Megabyte for name recognition. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he has these Trojan horse powers, which basically allow him to shapeshift into anybody he touches in mainframe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So wouldn't because he ends up shapeshifting into Mike the TV and Frisket and a few other like unknown like people we don't really have names for.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right after the fight scene in the church, he kisses Dot. So later in the episode, when they're like Megabyte is in the principal office, I was like, oh, it's going to be Dot because we established that he can, you know, shapeshift into like anyone he touches. Well, he kissed Dot earlier in the episode. It's going to be Dot, and
Mm.
then it was Frisket, and I'm like, that's not like to me. That's not nearly as interesting. I'm like, it would have been much more interesting if he had shapeshifted into Dot and like I don't know. I just think that would have been more interesting.
Okay.
Um,
Because I had that particular thought as well of it flashing through all the particular characters within the warm room of, oh my gosh, who is it? But it ended on Frisket. The one particular thought that ran through my mind out of all the particular characters, Frisket would probably be the one particular person that would actually be able to either sniff Megabyte out or realize that that's not him. That, for one case within the episode, they never really went on and they never really explored with, but also the case of depending on if he wasn't reacting or any sort of thing from there, you probably wouldn't think there wouldn't be a problem until you remember, oh, if it is a case that he's the in disguise and whatnot, him not reacting is also a red flag for it. But I think it's either something that they never really bothered exploring or just one of the things that, if you think about it, it's one of the things that can sort of work, but quite honestly, there could have been much better ideas used.
I actually like your explanation of why it's Frisket, because like he would be able to sniff Megabite out. Like that's interesting. I wish they would have either like they would have explored that more, because I never thought of that. And I'm like, that's a good point. Like I didn't think of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. Um, my the other issue I have is they set themselves up for a sequel that, now I know at the time they didn't know that they weren't going to get renewed for another movie or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the show initially got canceled when was the last episode prior to this?
Like with those, would have been like the late 1999 or so, 2 years
So
ago.
in Canada it aired in early 98. So
Mhm.
you didn't do anything for 3.5 years. You came back with two movies, and then you end on a cliffhanger, which I don't love, because I'm like, you could have just found a way to have some kind of resolution that would be like cathartic for the audience, because now it just feels like you ended on a cliffhanger again after 2.5 years and you're not getting renewed, and that just kind of is going to piss a lot of people off.
Yeah. Whether or not it was just kind of the case of they got something going, got this stuff sort of shown off, and figured that things were going to kind of blow up from that sort of thing, but just turned out it didn't. It was still kind of the ones of, even with the thought of the show and whatnot, it wasn't a good decision on their part to push it in that sort of way, I suppose.
Yeah, that's like a minor nitpick on my part. There are some fun references in this movie, though, that I wanted to quickly touch on.
Yes, yes.
So I think it's the first episode where they go into the game, which is totally not Pokemon for legal reasons.
Yeah, no, of course not. Who would think that?
But it's
Who
it's
would think?
it's this weird mix of Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. Because
Yeah,
like the trainers look like Dragon Ball Z characters to me. Maybe I'm wrong about that because I've barely watched any Dragon Ball Z.
no, it's pretty much accurate. The main thing that they kind of point at is there, but again, just the case of they threw the whole kitchen sink into it, and again, case of I remember that. It was cringe then. Why did they do it again?
I do have to say that I do love Frisket as Pikachu.
No, he was Frisket. Frisket.
Yeah, totally not a ripoff of Pikachu at all.
Uh-huh.
I I quite liked that. I'm like, oh, that's adorable.
Though I do have to say it does have the particular sort of line within them of Matrix, what? Stop trying to hit him and hit him. It's like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah. See, we had very different reactions to that because I didn't like it at all. I was like, oh, that's such a lame joke, guys. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the second episode, I think it's the second episode. There's a moment where Glitch Bob is trying to separate Glitch from himself, and he tries to use a teleporter, and it looks shockingly like the teleporters from the original Star Trek.
Yeah, with one of those things. One of the other particular methods that they worked with was, again, it's one of the cases of I only know it from a couple particular clips and little bits of knowledge about the movie, but some of the teleporters from there are from the Fly movie, and it's like, that's a good reference. The kids will never understand, but when they do, oh God, when they do.
Yes, and the last few I wanted to bring up was I think it would be like in the fourth episode. There's again, for legal reasons we can't call them the Blues Brothers, but they're the Blues Brothers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That made me very happy. Where they drive over the bridge and hit the neo virals because the Blues Brothers hate Illinois Nazis.
Yes.
The Blues Brothers is a great film. If anybody hasn't seen it, you should totally go watch it. It's great.
Yes, very much so.
Just don't watch the sequel.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Blues Brothers is a movie that's hard to explain to people that haven't seen it, though. I feel like Because like
Most definitely.
it's like a 2.5 hour musical action comedy that has like ridiculous chase sequences in it, and they're doing all of this to save an orphanage. Like it's and there's Nazis, and yeah, it's great. Go watch it. The highest of recommendations. Oh, also when there's a bunch of police that are coming around. They're I forget what they're driving to, but you see them. They have like an A12 on the back of their car, which I'm assuming is a reference to Adam 12,
Mhm.
which is fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen Adam 12. Have you?
Not that I can immediately recall.
Okay, it's a TV show from like the 60s and 70s, so I'd be a little surprised. But yeah, that was. Oh, and there. Yeah, that's really about it. Oh, the gateway does look a lot like it's from Stargate, though. Like they just stole the design from Stargate.
Yeah.
And I'm not even like
Yeah.
a Stargate fan, but I was like, that's the Stargate from Stargate. Anyway, that was about it for this movie. Did you enjoy it, Dave? Because I feel like you seem like you're a little 50-50 on it.
Quite honestly, it's there. There's the one or two little sequences and little ideas that are like, yeah, this works. Nice little flash from memories. But then, oh God, the cringe. Just the way that the first episode starts with the Brady Bunch intro, the old sitcom entrances, and other sorts of things from there. It's just like, I understand, but also the marvelous case of this is racking at my brain terribly.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention the Brady Bunch intro. That was
It's like
certainly an
I
interesting choice.
understand, but also, dear God, writhing on ground.
Yeah. I thought it was fine. Like I said, I thought ending on another cliffhanger is kind of an annoying decision from the folks making this, but whatever. I mean, I guess they have to try and convince YTV and whoever else to give them another season or another movie. So fair
Well,
enough. It
maybe
just didn't
with
work out.
either how the business was either supposedly going at the time or other particular thoughts that they were working on. Again, not exactly the best method. Like in comparison to Damon Rising, it worked out nearly perfectly until like the last 5 or so seconds where they left on the cliffhanger. It's like you could have ended it well.
Yeah, it's true. Um, I'm a little surprised that nobody like that they didn't get to make another direct to DVD movie. Because I mean, unless these sold really poorly, I'm a little surprised. Because like
Again,
2001,
not
2002, I feel like that's a prime time to do stuff like that.
mm, I suppose. Though it's kind of the case of it's a little sad that they didn't explore too much more of this, but then it's even worse that they kind of explored it later on and ooh, ooh with the thingies.
Oh,
Like,
are you referring to the live action series?
yeah.
Yeah, I am completely unfamiliar with that, and I will not be watching it.
No, I completely agree with you. I only know of little bit of information about it. It's a thing that exists, and I've seen a clip or two. And on the one hand, it brings hexadecimal back. It's like neat, but also kind of the case of just with the other particular thoughts. It's like I know what sort of things are going to be happening with this. And quite honestly, there's already been three other television shows I could supposedly look up or search into that are somewhat better with their ideas that I would not want Reboot to go into the live action rabbit hole that some particular series went into.
Yeah, I don't know who thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, very much a questionable thought.
It definitely was. It definitely was. Alrighty, well, I think that's gonna be about it for this. Any last minute thoughts on Reboot as a series, Dave?
Reboot is interesting. A nice, interesting series that existed throughout the time of end of the 90s, heading into the 2000s and whatnot from there. kind of just a typical sort of piece that relates to the things that I enjoy and other sorts of things from there. It's always kind of been around and interesting, but kind of the case of it's nice to sort of see people sort of discuss about it. It's like they know about reboot, hee hee. But also the case of it's not super well known by a whole ton of people or super talked about in certain sort of cases, which still keeps it interesting, but also case of why hasn't nobody explored the particular things with that? It would be supposedly neat.
And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel like it's more well known in Canada than anywhere else.
Yeah, it's one of those particular things that is around in its particular bubble, hasn't really expanded too far out much anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that like did probably fairly well in Canada, but I don't know if it landed anywhere else really.
Mm,
But yeah, I thought the series was pretty good. There are some um, there's some really good episodes, and then there's some really annoying episodes.
kind of balance wise, did it kind of balance out with most everything, or did it leave a little bit too much on the bad side for you?
That's hard to answer.
Mm,
I okay. Here's my take on it. If you're like me and Dave and you're in your 30s, I would not recommend going back to the show on your own. If you have kids that are like 5 or 6 and you want to watch something with them, I think it's fine for that.
okay.
But I wouldn't recommend going and watching it on your own because I think there's too much of it that you're going to be annoyed by. But maybe
Mm.
that's just me.
No, I could see that. It's understandable, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the two movies are probably the highlight of the series for me, though. I feel like that's
Okay.
the best stuff that they did. Even if I have some issues, I feel like overall their storytelling is the best there.
Okay. No, and I think especially with what they kind of had to use for the stories and budget wise for what they could sort of work with, it's definitely understandable.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's one of those tough sort of cases of I couldn't specifically recommend anything to specifically watch or where to specifically start. I'd probably either have to double check through the episodes to be like, what would be a decent thing to randomly show a person from one episode or whatnot that would be perfect to sort of give the concept of what reboot is?
yeah, yeah. I would say if you're interested, you can probably skip the TV series and just start with the movies. Actually, watch the last
Mm,
5 minutes of the last episode because it'll just recap everything for you, and then watch the two
yes.
movies.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's gonna be about it for me. Do you have any last minute thoughts, Dave?
Was trying for a particular joke or whatnot from the series, but quite honestly, it's better left for Mike the TV to run with those particular sorts of jokes on that sort of front. But
Okay, okay.
nice to dive into that sort of stuff again and either supposedly reintroduce you to it or show you the couple particular things within the series you haven't seen.
Okay. One last thing before we go. I actually did like Mike the TV in this when he was taken over by Megabyte. I was like, he was actually kind of funny.
Okay, with his particular style of spoke like Mike the TV, but had that little bit more of a biting, insulting sort of wit to him until case of he's supposed to get hurts, then he drops the facade completely. It's like, I'm Megabyte, you idiot. Don't you mess with me. It's like,
Also, when he's just running around going like, "Panic, panic, everybody, panic!"
yeah, yeah.
Alrighty. So until next time, I'm
Quite
Paul.
honestly, Bong wasn't too much help with that either, with his particular message starting out fairly well, but god damn it, don't get that particular artist to do any more artist renditions of Megabyte. It does not help.
That yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Alrighty. Until
Mhm.
well, I guess not until next time. I guess this is the last time. I've been Paul.
Yes, it finishes up with this particular series.
Are you gonna outro yourself, Dave?
Nah, it wasn't too much. It was just gonna make the point. Apologies.
Okay, see ya.